Oops. All right, welcome to the Planet M stage for our first afternoon session. I'd like to introduce our panelist, Jan Schulte. He's the president and CEO of EDAG, and he's got a little presentation, and then we'll go into some Q&A from there. Jan?
Thank you very much. The topic for today is mobility manufacturing, breathing in life into the mobility sector. I was a little bit wondering what I should talk about, mobility manufacturing, but I decided I'd talk about breathing life into the mobility sector. So as we know, I've been last week at CES. We talk about for a while now about connectivity, autonomy, e-mobility. These are all new technologies, and I want to go into that. But looking back, that's the thing. Oh. So I need to get used to that here. Looking a little bit back, automotive industry is now 120 years old. We started with the horse carriage 120 years ago, but then Daimler invented the first car, then Ford invented the Model T in mass production, and then we had basically for every life situation, we got a new car. After the Second World War, Volkswagen developed the Beetle because there was a need for cheap mobility. We had in the 60s the Ford Mustang, a second luxury sports car. Then in the 70s, Toyota Corolla as a response for the oil crisis. All these cars fulfilled one purpose, to diversify and give us a new mobility experience in different life situations. But all of them have one in common. There's one driver, there's a combustion engine in an isolated environment, technology environment in the vehicle. So this whole new evolution of technology brought us to, we sell 70 million cars per year, and we experience that. We just stay in traffic. The purpose of a car is to drive and to enjoy the car. That's not really enjoyable. And I lived in China for a while. In addition to that, we experienced that we have smog, not good air. Of course, traffic is not the only one who is responsible for having all the smog, but still it is a not insignificant part of it. So there were some first ideas over the time. As you maybe can hear, I'm German. That's Knight Rider. Kit with David Hasselhoff picked him up. You can call him over your watch. So we had already some ideas having connectivity, electric, autonomous cars. Even though the electric car invented by Edison in the 20s, there were already a serious intents to develop electric cars, but they never really came through. They were all products of the wrong time, and but today we are very close to develop those things. We have already the BMW i3, the Chevy Volt, the Model 3, and another electric powertrain technology, fuel cell, in the Toyota Mirai. And this is going to evolve. All of that requires very high investments, but all of that also gives everybody a lot of chances in winning new market shares because we restart from the ground up. When we look into all these three dimensions, connectivity, what gives it for chances, but also what do we have for challenges? Chances, we can integrate all our mobile devices into the car. We can integrate all our live devices into our car. We can personalize our car, but also our car communicate to infrastructure, to traffic lights, or whatever, to car communication, to get updates, what's happening, to get live streams into the car. The challenges on that is we have, as we all know, in all our cell phones or in all our TVs, we have much faster innovation cycles. I go every year to CES, and you see every other year complete new technology, complete new platforms, So we need to get adjusted to that these things are much quicker. We have open source platforms because all the players who want to get into that bring their own significant platform with them. So Apple, Google, Amazon Alexa, Samsung, LG, they have such a huge market power that they want to integrate into their car, and they don't let automotive supplier build new platforms. And clients actually want to have that. Our customers wants to integrate their devices. Me personally, I just use my iPhone as a navigation system. I don't use any GPSs in the car anymore because it's convenient. E-mobility, what are the chances? The chances are certainly carbon neutral mobility. It's a chance. It's not a given. We need to change the entire energy portfolio to get there. When we just have conventional energy, it's even worse. We as EDAC, we work with a lot of startup companies in China, in California, and all over the world. The interesting thing is we can have complete new package concept in the car. We don't have to integrate a V10 engine or a V12 engine, which takes a lot of space in the forefront. We have complete new dimensional concepts. We can have a car with the size of a Golf, but inside available space of a Ford Transit, so which impressive. We have a complete new driving experience. So I don't know if any one of you ever drove in an electric vehicle, but the available torque from the get-go is just impressive, and you can drive completely differently than when we cannot do it with a combustion-driven car. The challenges for all the electric mobility technologies, in my opinion, is all the raw materials. Where do raw materials come from? We have 70 million cars in the plant every year sold in the world. To substitute them with batteries is almost impossible, with lithium ion. Then infrastructure investments, then as I said, renewable energy. We need to invest in renewable energy. There are a lot of investments coming with that. ICE suppliers are challenged. Every supplier who's just focused on ICE technology is going to be challenged very much because their business case is running out of business. We have a lot of new players in battery technology, the same guys as we have it already in the connectivity, LG and Samsung. So the automotive industry build up companies like LG and Samsung, complete new technologies and power, which is hard to catch up with that. And what's going to be the leading technology in the future? Where do OEMs have to invest? Is it lithium ion? Is it solid state? Is it fuel cell? Or is it maybe a complete other technology what we don't know today? So there are a lot of different ways to go. And last but not least, I put also safety. Today we have, I would say, a lot of confidence to integrate a gasoline tank into the car very safely. But integrating a fuel cell tank or a hydrogen tank into the car is still a challenge. And I would say consumers are still risk averse to get a new car with an unknown technology. I mean, everybody knows the power of hydrogen when it explodes. So when this happens through the media, this technology might gonna be dead. The same thing for integrating batteries safely is also still a challenge. So in autonomy, as I said, German like to drive over the Autobahn. I mean, it makes fun as long as you can drive. When you stay in traffic, it doesn't make any fun anymore. So you rather want to sit in the car and let your car drive by themselves. So autonomy gives us the opportunity to do something else and to relax, but also take over when it makes fun again. Then we have a complete new public transportation system available. Here in the US, there is not so much public transportation. Instead of investing in a complete new public transportation system, a shared autonomous drive vehicle system can completely take over the function of a public transportation system. And we have complete new usability purposes of vehicles. So they are transporting, they can do complete other jobs when they are like robots. They don't have to stay around. Like all of your cars today, you buy them, and I would say the majority of you use your car maybe 1 hour a day, and the rest of the day, 23 hours each day, sort of stays around. So, but autonomous cars, they can do many more functions. A biggest challenge is still legislation in all these different markets to get a standard worldwide. Safety, I don't think, I mean, this discussion of CES, also even here, many people say full level 5 autonomy might not be possible, at least not in the foreseeable future. So do we ever have really all traffic situations covered with autonomy? I doubt it. And still, it will be a challenge to bring it to that way, to train the AI so much that it can cover the majority of the use cases, what can happen on the road. And the public acceptance, the same thing with e-mobility. We hear it in the media when an autonomous car has a crash, gets a lot of media attention. We shouldn't forget that we still have 35,000 deaths every year on the road by regular cars. So we don't talk about regular crash, but when an autonomous car crashes, it's a big deal. So that will always reduce the public acceptance of this new technology. What autonomy brings as well is diversification of the products. So we have many different new purposes how we can use a car. It can drive by itself completely as a robotaxi. It can be like an Audi A8, which is available today as a level 3, or supposed to be level 3 at least. And it's an ownership car. You own the car still. And I'm going to talk later about it. We will have also completely different ownership models of and business revenue streams for OEMs, which comes on top of just selling the product. But in autonomy, like in all of these three things, infrastructure investments are, in my opinion, the biggest and the most critical item that those technologies can succeed. Because also here, we need to have infrastructure in traffic systems, infrastructure in also in how do I charge an autonomous car which has no driver and is electric. It needs to go by itself to a station and need to be filled somehow. So the person who does that is also a robot. So there are many things to think about, what we might not have really on our radar right today, but there are situations which comes up when I want to build up a new technology. And this is also a question on which markets do I focus, because today we design a car and it's able to run in China, US, Brazil, and somewhere in Africa. Because I'm going to find somewhere a gas station in Africa. But a robotaxi, you can just deploy it somewhere in a third world country. Doesn't make sense, there is no infrastructure at all, and they're probably not going to catch up. So as a summary, I put some open points together. We're going to have many different vehicles, in my opinion, for different markets, for first, second, and third world cars, because of infrastructure. All these technologies, what we have today in the Mercedes S-Class or Audi A8, where I can predict the road conditions and my chassis system adapts automatically and can detect if there's a pothole or not. I mean, even here in Detroit, I personally had already 4 flat tires because of potholes. An autonomous car can't really react. It just runs through that, and then it stays on the side and has a flat tire, and it's not even able to change. I can change my tire, but my autonomous car stays there and waits for service. So, and that's Michigan. It's a very developed, rich country. What do I do in second and third world countries? In my opinion, this doesn't work. So we're going to have different cars. Diversified vehicles in established markets, even in Europe or China or the US, we're going to have or Japan, we're going to have many different cars because of different powertrains alone. We're going to have a fuel cell, we're going to have ICEs for a while, we're going to have different battery technologies. Today you have lithium ion, they evolutionized the technology, but as I said with the available lithium in this world, especially looking to the countries where I get this lithium from, it's, I think, not sufficient available, and it's very unstable countries to just focus on that technology. We as EDAC did also some fuel cell projects, one in particular with Daimler together, the latest one for the GL class. And it's a challenging technology, but I think generating hydrogen is the easiest way to do because it's available everywhere, and it's higher efficiency. So I think there will be a big mix of different powertrain options for the next 10 to 20 years, but that requires a lot of different cars and body styles to integrate all these different powertrains into one vehicle or into vehicles. We're going to have more vehicle manufacturers. It's interesting, we all talk about these startups in California, but there are startups everywhere. There are startups in China, there are startups in India, there are startups in Vietnam, there are startups in Russia. And we have the chance to work with these as EDAC together. And they're not just a bad joke. They, of course, some of them will never make it, but there will be a few who will survive because we have, in my opinion, a complete new market which grows from the ground up. There is a lot of capital available that people put into these companies to bring down the entry walls into that market, and one or the other gonna survive. Of course, China is also pushing that with money into the Chinese local OEMs. We're gonna have a following worldwide consolidation of all these. Some of them will die, maybe or some of the established gonna die. I don't know, some European companies, some American companies who are not prepared for that. Because I think a significant part of our future success for our OEMs is who has the mobility as a service revenue stream under control. Who has that under control and best in practice has a USP in the future. It's not just selling the car and have the best lease deal. It's much more. Potential answers. Strategic Alliance or M&A. I had an OESA presentation the other week, and they were talking about what were the latest investments in the automotive area. When you look to the Lyft or the Uber cooperation, the cruise purchase from GM, which for $1 billion. There are huge investments going on to buy technology, to buy more capabilities, because all of these technologies require a lot of investments, but also talent. And you can just build up because I want to do it. It's maybe sometimes better to cooperate with someone or to build a company. The modularization of vehicles, you see it with Volkswagen. I think they did it a very good job to modularize their cars in the MEB platform. MQ, I don't know how familiar you are with Volkswagen, but they have a very modular system, which is interesting, and I think it allows them to have a very flexible production line. Because of the diversified products, we shouldn't have one plant who can produce one car. There should be a plant who are able to produce 6, 7, 8 different cars by applying different modules where you have a high flexible production line. This goes also into Industry 4.0 and in the communication in the whole supply chain, that they are integrated to be able to produce cars that flexible in the future. I put also a point development for durability. Might sound a little bit weird, but as I said, your car, as mine, stays around per day 23 hours and maybe drives 1 hour. A shared vehicle, a robotaxi, gonna drive probably 23 hours and stays around 1 hour. So it's done after 6 months when we continue to develop a car as we do it today. With our 1 hour usage per day, the car survives maybe 10, 15 years. When you reduce that, it maybe survives a half year and then it's broken. So we might have complete new development technologies that this thing is more durable, or we have to exchange these cars every 6 months. And what is our business as an engineering supplier? We're going to have optimized ED&D tools. So we need to reduce our development cycle. Now we have 5 years. It's not unlikely that we maybe have to have for 3 years to be able to integrate complete new technologies. I mean, we start to develop it today, and the end of production is today, maybe in 8 years, 9 years. So what do? Today we decide we want to integrate the iPhone 10. Who knows if Apple still exists in 10 years with this innovation cycle what we have. So what do we have to integrate on the way to the next 10 years? So we need to be more open, we need to be more flexible, and we need to be quicker in designing our products. So that's basically it for me for my presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jan. And I just realized I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. My name's Sam Abul-Samad. I'm a senior analyst with Navigant Research. I like your presentation, Jan. One of the interesting things you brought up is early on in the history of the auto industry, electric vehicles were actually quite popular. In fact, at one time were more popular than gasoline vehicles. And one of the reasons for that was a lack of infrastructure for getting gasoline. Ferdinand Porsche's first car that he developed was an electric vehicle, and then he followed that up with a hybrid before moving on to gasoline. So as we move into this new era of transportation and mobility, and we start to shift away from individual vehicle ownership, or even before we get to that, just shifting to particularly to electrification, how do you think that the industry, or society needs to get to, what do we need to do to make sure that we have the pieces in place to support all that, to support these kinds of changes?
Now, I think we should create awareness. We should build up confidence in consumer that they are able to accept, as I said, the autonomous car. What do we think when we walk on the street and there comes a car around the corner and there's no one sitting in it? I think people are scared in the first place. And we need to clarify, to push these technologies also, all the infrastructure updates what we need to do in order to fulfill the requirements to get there where we want to be.
Do you think that the manufacturers need to get more involved? They've started to in the last couple of years, but do you think they need to make more of a direct investment in that infrastructure in order to support the kinds of products that they're trying to create?
I would say the Tesla does it right now. I mean, they have also still kind of a monopoly in electric vehicles, and take maybe the Nissan Leaf a little bit out, which is the most selling car, but still in the premium segment, it's Tesla. So when all these OEMs have to pay for that, I mean, there is a risk that we don't have a standard. So maybe we need to find a standard that also manufacturer in charge to invest into that. But this would be also a complete new technology and revenue what has to be thought about. I think it's better when other companies like Shell or BP or
energy companies that are in the energy business,
who supply today the energy for the automotive industry, that they also change their business model. This would be the most logic and the most reasonable instead of having OEMs investing into that.
You mentioned modularity, and you're referencing Volkswagen in particular. I think that they have gone down, really gone down the right path in terms of re-architecting their vehicles. And as we look to that future 5, 10, 15 years down the road, we're using these, where we have very high utilization of shared vehicles. It seems to me that if we continue designing the vehicles in this kind of the same way we do today, that idea you expressed of the vehicles being worn out after 6 months, it seems like that, because the energy and the resources it takes to build a vehicle from scratch, it seems like that might actually be a worse solution, perhaps in some ways, than where we are today. Are you, is your company or the clients that you're working with, are they looking at how do you re-architect the vehicle in order to support these new kinds of mobility use cases?
I would say not necessarily the traditional OEMs. In Volkswagen in particular, this is why I mentioned them, because they think about how you can redefine the car. I'm certain that any other OEM does the same thing. It would wonder me if not. But we are strongly involved with all these startup companies who create complete different business cases. Like best mentioned eVelocity, what they do. They have a complete separate skateboard, and they modularize their car as much as possible to keep the costs down for the car.
Yeah, the traditional approach to designing and developing a vehicle, as you mentioned, since they sit idle, 90+% of the day for most users, is to develop a vehicle that, where most of the major systems in the vehicle and the vehicle itself are designed to last 10, 15, 20 years. Do you foresee a time when we shift to an architecture where perhaps the core structure of the vehicle is still designed to last that longer period of time, maybe using different materials that might be less recyclable, like say carbon fiber, but some of the other components that might be designed to be replaced on a more frequent cycle, like batteries or motors or communications or electronics and entertainment systems, and that way you can stay up to date with the technology. So you have the core part of the vehicle that lasts a long time, and then you just update pieces as needed.
I would say a car is a very integrative system, so you can't just, I mean, there is a modularization is one thing, it's a complete new engineering approach, certainly, because you have so many integrating components where you can't just pull one out, put the next one in, and it works. So it's a little bit more complicated, but maybe that's just a complete new engineering approach to have it that modular in a car. And it didn't mean necessarily after 6 months you get something new. You also have to design and engineer something completely new and test it. Which is gets complicated, but I think especially having those technologies and the need to integrate those technologies, and those technologies have an innovation cycle which is much quicker. We need to find a way, how do we integrate them without having every 3 years an outdated car? Because you can buy a car today, which is when you can buy it already 3 years old, 4 years old with its initial technology integration, so let it run for the next 3 years and are completely outdated. But how do we do that we integrate it into the car? It's modularization, but due to the complexity of the car, it's also not easy to integrate everything like a plug-and-play system, like Lego.
Yeah, well, I think you mentioned the product design cycles gone from 5 years, trying to shorten that to 3 years. Does it seem possible that we can shift even further into kind of a continuous product development cycle where we're not even thinking of it in terms of a whole product, but to continuously evolve the systems and obviously integrating new components as we go, but replacing systems as the technology progresses? Can we do that? Can we get to that kind of point?
Maybe for some of the systems, but in the end of the day, you have to look to the car as a standalone vehicle, which requires a lot of certification processes through all the markets. I doubt that you have a continuous evolving process without, it requires then a lot of certification efforts to get one car always certified through NHTSA, through Europe, and all the different legislation. That's hard. I don't think that this is ever possible, because I would say the car is maybe next to the airplane the highest regulated product, or maybe an atomic nuclear power plant,
Yeah.
but that's all. There's a high restrictions on a car, what you have to fulfill, and that is all integration into the car. I don't think that this is ever possible.
What about certain subsystems? Like, for example, you talked about, at CES, there were a lot of companies talking about voice assistant systems and entertainment systems in the vehicle as we evolve the user experience, towards, to how people are going to use automated vehicles. Can some of those parts of the vehicle perhaps evolve at a faster pace than the things that are more highly regulated?
Certainly, there are some systems which can be replaced. Definitely systems who don't have a safety requirement. I mean, airbag is a little bit hard to exchange all the time, but I would say infotainment systems is definitely possible, as long the electric architecture supports it. So when you set up your car from the get-go to a more flexible electrical architecture, then you can change those systems easily. But more complex systems, or especially safety-related systems, no, I doubt it.
Okay. What about, just in general, it's the whole idea of user experience? Is that something that your company is involved in looking at the user experience and developing some of those aspects with the companies you work with?
Yeah.
And how do you see that potentially evolving as we get into this new era of mobility?
I would say with traditional OEMs, we are supporting them in executing their user experience ideas. With startup companies, we have the luxury to create user experience, what they want to have, how they look into, how they want to define their product. So we as EDAC, as an engineering design company, help those to transform a rough idea into a physical product, which represents the user experience this OEM was looking for, or this startup company, more or less. I call them also.
To help them execute on a conceptual idea.
Yeah. I mean, from a traditional OEM, usually the concepts are done by themselves internally, and we help them afterwards with our capabilities to execute their ideas. With startup companies, we are right up front, starting with the development of the car.
Are do you see any potential, like what do you see as the biggest potential hurdles in adapting the user experience, or any other elements of using an AV? Um, is it going to be in terms of driver comfort or passenger comfort in the vehicle? Do you see potential problems, perhaps with motion sickness when, if people are trying to watch a movie while they're riding along in the vehicle? I mean, what do you see as some of the main areas that need to be addressed that still have to be worked on?
First of all, as I said, it's acceptance. When do people really accept that something is driving without having a driver in it? Second, I mean, with motion sickness, I don't think there is a huge problem when you just have a outside TV, because we have it today already. That shouldn't be a big problem. Everybody is different. Another hurdle, I would say, is definitely that you create a car which can operate completely standalone. I was just talking to someone who is in the door and tailgates opening mechanism involved. That was something I wasn't even thinking about, but think about, you have an autonomous car, shared vehicle, and you walk away and you leave the door open. I mean, this car can't drive. So today we have electric tailgates who close by themselves, but we don't have doors who close by themselves. But these are things which have to also be integrated in the future. Things can detect by themselves what's happening, or something is destroyed in the car, that this car detects that is able, there's no driver anymore. Or that someone left his garbage in this car. The next one gets into the car, he doesn't want to have the garbage of the previous passenger. So how do I get it out of that? So that plays all into the same thing. What's going to be the acceptance for this technology? This has to be taken care of. These are all interesting thoughts. What you don't, I mean, it's a fascinating technology that can drive by itself. There are many use cases where you don't even think about from the get-go, but have to be taken care of, that people feel comfortable and they want to use it.
Yeah, it seems like one of the biggest challenges, in terms of acceptance. I mean, we've become used to, over the past century, of having our own vehicle, and we keep our stuff in our vehicle. We have, whether it's umbrellas or shopping bags, whatever things that we store in our vehicles, which has become a remarkably personal space for most people. And to shift to an environment where suddenly you can't leave your stuff behind. You mentioned, having vehicles that need to be cleaned up after somebody gets out of there, which means that there's going to be some degree of monitoring of what's going on in the vehicle, what's in the vehicle, and privacy. Suddenly starts to, what little privacy we still have today. Our car tends to be one of those places. Do you think that could be a hurdle that might be particularly hard to overcome?
No, I don't think so, because I mean, there are some taxis where you have already today cameras, dash cameras, where you get monitored the whole time when you sit in the taxi. So this shared vehicle is, if we talk about those cars, it's for me a robo taxi. So that's basically kind of a taxi. I don't think there is people don't see that as their personal space necessarily. What is a big hurdle to me as well is how does it look like, just a complete off the topic, but I think it's also very important to think about a robotaxi. How much importance does a brand have, or how does a brand separate itself in those robotaxis? When I call today an Uber, I don't care if it's a Ford, if it's a Chevrolet, or is it a BMW. I just want to get from A to B. That's all. And when I have a robotaxi, I would think people think the same thing. They don't care. How do I differentiate myself? So who is going to produce those things, those cars? This is a complete off topic from what we talked previously, but I think that is to push that technology, and how do we get into that, who's operating those and all these things.
Do you think that would be something that would be the fleet, creating their brand character, or the vehicle manufacturer, or some combination of those two?
It must be an interesting combination because you have a provider, it's like Uber or Lyft. There might be I don't think that Uber or Lyft will ever own those cars. They will just maybe rent it or lease them from someone. So it might be a leasing company who gets that. And then they also want to have every OEM who's producing those cars want to have some of its flavor in it. But how do we do that? It's a complete new question. How do you differentiate and how do you create something in the car when the passengers don't actually care as much, or how do I create a demand as an OEM?
Or create some value that customers might be willing to even pay a premium for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Any questions from the audience? All right. Well, okay. Can you speak up a little, please? Or you guys have a mic? Hold on a second.
So thank you, Jan, for the presentation, and thank you for the panel. My question is, you mentioned that traditional OEMs are undergoing an evolution, and you think that the ones that will survive are the ones that have the mobility as a service line. My question is, wouldn't that kind of line cannibalize their original business model of selling vehicles?
Of course it does. The question is how important or how much it does, but we need to think about something completely new because how long are really OEMs successful in selling cars for relatively high prices? So when I think about, I mean, an Audi or BMW is a nice car, but paying $60,000 for a car or 70 or 80, that's a hard decision. So when I get it on a complete different mobility aspect, on this sense, I can sell my cars, still can sell my car, but I need a more professional because I think there is a growing and growing and growing hurdle for people who think I don't want to spend $80,000 to get a car. And we have all this technology and bring all this technology into cars, which doesn't make them cheaper. It makes them even more expensive. So when I reduce maybe life cycles, then it makes it even more expensive. So I need to have a complete new revenue stream in order to maintain my business model as a company itself.
And to address that, the affordability is becoming an issue today anyway. The average transaction price of cars in the U.S. now is, I think, over $35,000. We're more frequently seeing people taking 84-month loans to buy new cars, and so. As Jan said, with these expensive vehicles, we need to find more affordable ways for people to get transportation and get mobility. And if the manufacturers don't cannibalize their existing business, somebody else will. So this is why we see, Ford doing their autonomous vehicles LLC, their smart mobility business, GM Cruise, Volkswagen's Moya division, what Toyota's doing with SoftBank with Monet. All of these approaches to getting into the mobility as a service business, if they have to do it, because if they don't cannibalize their own business, someone else will.
We have seen in different other industries where we have people are not aware that there is a customer demand change in many things. I mean, just look to here the US cable TV and pay TV. So, I mean, never really changed the system. It was maintaining a system which was relatively expensive. Someone else comes in like Netflix, someone else like Amazon Prime, and they revolutionized the entire business. Now they are done. And
yeah.
I mean, the success of Netflix and Amazon is outstanding.
I mean, a great example of cannibalizing your own business is Apple. In January 2007, they were selling more MP3 players than everybody else in the world combined by a wide margin. I think they had about 80% of the market for MP3 players with the iPod. Today, who uses an iPod anymore? Because they brought out the iPhone and they created a device that, in addition to phone functions and internet communicator functions, was also an iPod, as Steve Jobs famously announced. And they successfully cannibalized their own business with something that had vastly more revenue potential than what they had up to that point. And so that's the sort of thing that I think the auto industry is hoping to do, to get into something where they can leverage this new technology, to get recurring revenue streams through a services model before somebody else does it to them. Any additional questions? All right, well, I want to thank you, Jan, for your insights. That was,
Thank you,
that was
Sam.
great. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us.